The Heat have lost 3 straight and are at a critical juncture in the season, so we're joined by NBC News' Rohan Nadkarni to talk about what's next. And Wes, I have no idea where it goes from here.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Join the Cookie Gang, become an everydayer. That means subscribing, tuning in every Monday through Friday, and signing up to the Locked On Heat text line with the link in the show notes. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com, place your NFL live bets all season long. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On NBA Daily and Real GM Radio. I'm here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. We are thrilled today to be joined by the one and only Rohan Nadkarni from NBC News. Rohan, this is the first time we've had you on this season. I think this is the first time we've had you on with the new job title. Also, man, it's been way too long. Thanks for jumping on here.
Has it really been that long? That seems not possible.
Maybe one other time we had you on.
It's crazy. I mean, you guys got the fancy graphics, your fancy cold open. You know, David's doing characters now. I get it. You know, there's not a lot of room in this show for me anymore. So
right, between Jose and Kendall,
I appreciate you guys figuring out a way to squeeze
Kendall's a big personality, so it takes up a lot of.
There's barely room for me on the show with him on here. There's a ton to get into, Rohan. Like I said, we haven't talked in a long time. You jump on, unfortunately, on the heels of a 3-game losing streak. But before we get into any of that stuff, I want to do half empty, half full takes. And then we have a lightning round of questions that we'll get to here at the end of the show. But since it is the first time we've had you on this season, it's been a very eventful season. Big picture, open-ended question to start us off here. What do you think is the biggest story from the Heat season so far?
I think just the rejuvenation of the franchise in general. You know, we talked about it, I think, a lot. This is why I'm sure you've had me on, because we talked about this a lot at some point last year as they were going through the whole Jimmy Butler saga, and we don't need to relitigate that. But the point being, for the people who were there every day, that was a miserable experience. It undoubtedly had an impact on the season, and I'm happy for everyone who was involved last year, who's still here this year, to get a step away from that, for there to be no hangover from that situation, for this team to reinvent itself on the fly, even with so many similar pieces from last season. I think the bigger picture thing has just been the rejuvenation. It seems like everyone has bought in. Spo, I think, you know, a lot of people are saying Coach of the Year candidate. Obviously, they just had this recent losing streak, but seeing him really sink his teeth into this roster, and I think going back to doing what he loves most, which is just trying to get the literal best out of a group of people. You know, he's someone who really loves, I think, that the service of coaching, the literal job of coaching, trying to get the best out of everyone. So to me, the big picture has just been the rejuvenation. Now, does that mean it's a championship contender? Does that mean they're going to win a playoff series? Those are different questions, but I think things are actually moving in the right direction in a very positive way.
That's a very positive spin on it, because I think a lot of people are kind of overlooking. They're kind of caught up in the moment and the excitement of watching this offense flourish, at least earlier in the season, despite the 3-game losing streak. But I think it's kind of being overlooked how much this has been a breath of fresh air for a franchise that desperately needed a kind of personality overhaul. They were so bought in and intertwined with Jimmy Butler and his personality and everything else that it kind of shaped the last 6 years of the Heat franchise. And now it's a completely different. It's not a negative or a positive thing about Jimmy. I think mostly a positive experience, obviously, because of the success that the franchise did enjoy. But to be able to find a new way of, you know, just kind of redeveloping who you are as a team, of reshaping or kind of imbuing the culture, if you will, with new life and a new purpose. And I think that's been a great story that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. We've hinted at it here, how different this feels for us covering this team and for the players themselves. But I think it's something that a lot of people at a national level really aren't talking about it enough.
I agree. And I think that there's value to that goes beyond just wins and losses, because they were staring at a situation where, it could have been similar to what it was like before they got Jimmy Butler, where the team was kind of
Yeah.
stuck in the middle, and it really looked like, what is the pathway here? And they obviously got, I think, very fortuitous that the Jimmy Butler thing worked out the way it did, at least in the start. But they really looked stuck in the wilderness. Now, again, they still have a long way to go to, I think, get back to the level of contention they want to be at. But this is a start. Having, a new identity is a start. Having a very distinct style of play is a start. A willingness to adapt, which we know Spo has. So I don't think they have to worry about being stuck in an identity that's also not going to work for them. But I think these are all like positive. It's funny. They obviously talk so much about culture, but they had to rebuild theirs a little bit. And I
Yes.
think that's what's happened so far this season.
They are losers of 3 straight games. They're 14-10 now, 6th place in the Eastern Conference. They've been as high as 2nd place in the East at times in the standings. But the 3-game losing streak, Rohan, I mean, what are you concerned about it? Like, we could do the panic meter thing if we want. I just general thoughts on that.
Look, it's obviously not ideal. They are having the situation where they seem to have frequently, where it's like guys truly in and out of the lineup. Like this guy's playing this game, and now he's out the next, and now he's back. Like, very unclear what the exact nature of these injuries are. I think Jaquez has not looked like the same player since he's started to have some injury issues, some groin issues. His burst doesn't look quite the same as it did at the start of the season. And you've seen teams start to adjust to kind of the second unit blitz that Jaquez was in charge of, in terms of putting centers on him, finding ways to slow him down, really testing him on the perimeter. Spo is going to have to start to find counters. It's almost like a speed run of what was happening with like the Miami Dolphins in 2022, 2023, where it felt like they'd come out of the gates really, really hot. Teams started crowding the middle of the field, and it's like, does Mike McDaniel have another punch? What's Spo's other punch right now? I think they're going to have to find some better counters for this team. A couple of the losses, the Mavericks lost, but that team's just been playing better basketball recently. I think they've actually been pretty good with Anthony Davis in the lineup. Nembhard has been a really good player for them. Clay is better than even he was like a week earlier when they played the Heat. So that loss, I don't think was quite as bad as it seemed in the moment. The Kings one, inexplicable. You don't expect that kind of effort at home on the heels of a 2-game losing streak.
Right.
That's the kind of loss where, let's say it happened a month from now, I don't know if people would even bat an eye on it, because sometimes weird stuff does happen in the regular season. That happening at the end of a 2-game losing streak was a little surprising to me, but I don't know if it's a full-on panic situation just yet. My panic meter would be pretty low. One thing that brings me hope about this team is how good they've been at home generally. The Kings loss, again, notwithstanding, they've been really good at home. I think that they have kind of like a formula to stand on, which is be great at home, steal some road wins. So I'm not full-on panicking just yet, but I do think they're going to need to figure out some other punches. And this has just been, I would say, if I have one big criticism of Spo in general, and it's not 100% his fault, it's that it just seems very difficult for the Heat to find any sort of lineup consistency. How many times have we come on the show and said, who are their best 5 players?
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels very difficult for them to find any kind of real lineup consistency. And once again, I don't know what their best closing lineup is.
Well, speaking of changes to the lineup, I think a lot of the problems with the offense have just coincided with the return of Tyler Herro. And so I think a lot of the fans are kind of pointing at him. And I don't think it's justified. I think there have been a number of reasons, like I said, whether it's teams figuring out or just scouting this group better because now there's a larger sample size that they've been able to prepare for it differently. But it's an unfortunate, coincidence that Tyler's return coincides with the fact that the offense has just kind of flattened out a little bit over recent weeks. From an outsider's perspective, what have you seen from Tyler and his return, and how much of an impact do you think it's having on Miami's offense looking slightly different over the last few weeks?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think I was impressed with how quickly he was able to get back to his spots on the floor, considering he was joining kind of a well-oiled machine. And he had missed training camp. I don't know how many practices he had even gotten in by that point in the season. I thought he looked really impressive. That first game, he had such a bad plus-minus. I think that was because he was trying to carry the bench without Jaquez. which is a very difficult position for him to be in. We've seen him be in this situation now where a couple of times he's in with 4 bench players and he's trying to carry those units. So they're putting a lot on his shoulders. I don't think the issue is that Tyler Herro is on the floor and he is hijacking the offense. I think the issue is more, how do we integrate him? We have to get him and Norm reps together on the fly. I think that the returns have been positive in a small sample size, but it can still be clunky at times. It's what is the best rotation? Should it be Tyler with the 4 bench players? Should it be Norm with the 4 bench players? Figuring out what that rotation is going to be. That is also coincided with the fact that like Niko Jovic has fallen off a cliff seemingly. So I'm with you guys. There's a kind of lot of factors to just isolate it to Tyler. The bigger issue to me was it at the end of the Pistons game? Now it was the end of the Pistons game. We saw kind of that difficult defensive situation he had against Cade Cunningham. Mm-hmm. To me, the bigger issue is finding the right lineup balance because Davion has been such an important member to this team. Andrew Wiggins is their only real perimeter defender, but they're asking him to defend bigs if they play Tyler along with Davion and Norm. So to me, those are the issues they have to sort through, finding the right lineup balance, which has kind of been the kind of overarching historic problem, I think, with Tyler. But Wes, I'll let you get in here, but I don't think you can isolate their issues to Tyler.
Well, yes, and to David's point before, it's almost coincidental that the Heat offense started to slow down a little bit on the heels of Tyler Herro coming back, which I think was always going to happen because Tyler didn't even go through a preseason or a training camp with this offense, and he's just trying to learn it on the fly while the team was playing well. That was always going to be hard for him. Also, Tyler Herro hasn't played the last 2 games, which have been some of the worst offensive games of the year. So I don't understand how, for the people that are hating on Tyler Herro and be like, see, this is why you got to trade Tyler or whatever. It's like he didn't even play the last 2 games, and those were really bad performances. We got to move on to some other segments. I want to do a half empty, half full segment here. Some of our more optimistic takes and some of our more negative takes. We'll do that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. And FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. With live spreads and money lines adjusting instantly, you can have player props update as guys start to heat up. And you can even bet the next touchdown score, drive results, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. This segment is called Half Empty, Half Full. David, I want to start with you. What's a half full or half empty take that you've got on this recent stretch?
Ooh, half full. I don't know that I have a half full one. I guess I should try to be a little bit more optimistic. I'm just not overly concerned about what we see because I think every team goes through different iterations, even of itself, at a smaller sample over the course of an 82-game season. You're going to have players go in, go out, and as such, all these challenges, as much as we kind of tie our emotions as fans to every win or loss, I think there's a bigger picture here. And I trust that this franchise with this group, especially with Spo at the helm, can kind of guide them through it. So to me, the losing streak is more of a small hurdle on the way to something much bigger because the season is a marathon, not a sprint, as cliche as it might sound. And you kind of have to take that sort of approach and attitude. You're going to have bad moments as you're incorporating players, as you deal with injuries. But as long as this group has that kind of renewed sense of purpose that we talked about in the first segment, I'm optimistic that they'll be able to figure it out. And it's all going to help in the end because once you go through this kind of adversity, you'll be able to come out as a better team, more cohesive and more focused on what you really want to do, which is to win a lot of games.
In other words, the Kings lost maybe a little bit of a wake-up call for this team. I don't know, but yeah, I'm with you. I don't make that much out of this losing. Herro's missed 2 of these games. Powell missed 1. Davion Mitchell missed 1. Pelle Larsson, who's been a really good glue guy for a bunch of different units, has missed a game. That's not necessarily my half-full take, but Rohan, before I get to mine, I want to go to you.
My half full take is going to be that Bam Adebayo is having an underrated season.
There we go.
Ooh,
Okay. Bam is currently 4th among all centers in scoring at 19.2 points a game. The only guys he's behind are Jokic, Şengün, and Towns.
True.
Karl Anthony Towns, one of the greatest, shooting big men of all time,
yes.
is 35.3% from three this year on 5.8 attempts per game. 5.4 attempts per game, sorry. Bam Adebayo, 35.2% on 5.1 attempts per game.
He sucks.
That's remarkable. That's
Yeah.
really remarkable. And that's with playing roughly around only 30 minutes a game. His minutes have been kind of low this year. He obviously exited one game very early due to injury, but he hasn't had a ton of high-minute games. And this is, again, with an offense that I think, of all people, has minimized what Bam does great the most, which is set screens, which is run handoffs with shooters. They don't do a lot to get Bam easy shots going toward the rim. It's asking him to do a lot of one-on-one creation. I tweeted this stat out the other night. I haven't looked it up what it's been the last few days, but among those guys who are scoring, whether it's Jokic, whether it's Şengün, whether it's Towns, whether it's Mobley, whether it's Alex Sarr, Bam's running by far the least frequency of pick and rolls as a roll man. So they are not making it easy on him. He's had to make a huge adjustment to get this offense going. And the fact that he's found a niche in it, the fact that he's been confident letting it fly from three, I think has been remarkable. So in some ways, I think he's having an underrated season. I think people look at the number and they're just like, why can't Bam score 24 points a game?
Yeah.
If he did, he would be like a top 3 player in the NBA because it's that hard to do everything else that he is doing at the level he's doing it. And I understand people think no ceiling. This guy needs to be an A1 superstar. When you accept the fact that Bam's not going to be in that first class of superstar, not going to be a great scorer, I understand that's obviously a hugely important part of the game. But to me, that really unlocks your ability to just enjoy how special this player is.
It's such a great call, Rohan, because we're at a point now where Bam's averages are basically just going to be their averages. Everybody's asking him, when can he score 24 points per game? They need more from the offense. He's not a true number one option. Okay, we know what this guy is. Like, we just know what he is. But to your point, for him to still average 19 to 20 points per game while taking away the bread and butter of his offense, which was, as a roll man, not only getting to the rim, which was more of his bread and butter early in his career. Years ago, they took away the dribble handoff thing. That just stopped happening a couple years ago. So, okay, you had your bread and butter in the roll thing. We got rid of that. Now your bread and butter is the dribble handoff thing. We got rid of that. Then his bread and butter became as a roll man, but rolling into that free throw line jumper. Mm-hmm. And they basically got rid of that too. They're still every once in a while hit it, but they got rid of that in terms of the function of the pick and roll part of it.
That was a huge deal.
Yes.
When they asked him to develop that shot. That was in direct response to how he was being guarded in the playoffs. And we saw it. We saw it that year against the Bucks. We saw it that year against the Denver Nuggets in the NBA Finals. How much he leaned on that paint jumper. To your point, now they're like, please go learn an entirely different skill set. And now I haven't looked up again the numbers. I should have done it before this podcast, but like he's been nails on corner threes this year. Like it's just he continues to work his game around the team's limitations. I mean, that was in part why he learned that paint jumper, right? Bam has like never played with if he played with a James Harden type, you saw what Zubac did last year.
Yep.
Like Bam's never played with like the perfect superstar to complement him, which is why I think like another reason his numbers aren't at 23, 24 a game. Like if he got 2 or 3 more easy lobs a game, how different would his stats be? So
if you put Trae Young on this team, for instance, right? And I'm not going to do the Trae Young trade thing, but like just for an instance, a patented pick and roll ball handler type, yeah, his efficiency goes through the roof because everything's just being spoon fed to him. Bam has had to create everything for himself for a very long time.
Yeah, so I've just been really impressed with what I've seen from him this year.
My half full take. I'm not sure we're at the point yet where we have to have the kind of conversation about Davion Mitchell, about like where he ranks among the top point guards. Like I'm not doing that. What I am doing is we have to have a conversation about Davion Mitchell as an offensive player. This guy has been awesome for this offense. He's maybe the most underrated reason why the Heat are off to the start that they're off to. Defensively, we know what he's about. On the ball, guy's a savage. He's one of the best players in the league in fighting over screens. To me, it's like him, Jalen Suggs, Dylan Brooks. Like, those are the guys. When you're talking about like fighting over screens, like those guys have surpassed, Drew Holiday at his age now. Just getting over and sticking to bodies. And that's such an important part. And they really missed him, by the way, in that Kings game, because Zach LaVine was just getting free every time he wanted to. And when he wasn't free, he was making contested jumpers. But defensively, they missed him. But offensively, he leads the league in assist-to-turnover ratio, averaging more than 5.5 assists to every turnover. That's nuts. He's been so efficient. And this isn't like a Tyus Jones assist-to-turnover ratio where he dribbles the ball to half court and just throws it to somebody and doesn't really create anything offensively. Davion's getting 2 feet in the paint, and he's kicking out, and he's an engine to this up-tempo offense. The on-off numbers really support the case that he's one of Miami's most important offensive players, not just defensive players. And early in his Heat tenure, after the trade deadline, there was a little bit of concern. Concern's a strong word. There was a little bit of scuttle like internally in the Heat organization where it was like, okay, we like what he does on the ball, but is it a little too Patrick Beverley-ish? Because off the ball, he's just not quite where we want him to be. He has really developed off the ball defensively to the point where the coaching staff is thrilled with him, basically in every facet. He's been so good for this team, and what a steal out of that Jimmy Butler trade to come out of that 3-way deal, bringing Davion over from Toronto. He's been so great for this team, and he's sort of just become this core part. Rohan, what have you thought about him?
A revelation. You nailed it. I mean, I think he's up to like 8 assists a game or something like that. I never, ever thought he would be the assist man he's been for this team. Like, this is by far a career high in assists. It's kind of remarkable. The 3-point shooting, I think he's done just enough. He's so aggressive at attacking the rim also. Like, they don't really have anyone who puts a ton of pressure on the rim. That's been another issue for them these last 5 or 6 years now. Obviously he's not Anthony Edwards or something like that, but the fact that he can get shots going toward the rim, he's been so good. The fact that he's still shooting over 50% now, over a quarter into the season, it kind of blows me away. In some ways, he's kind of like they're not similar players, but he's giving them a lot of what they like wanted and needed from Kyle Lowry when this team was really, really good. Yep. In terms of the defense, the annoying things, the little things, selectively looking for his offense at times when they really need it. Obviously, you don't think he's as good of an offensive player as Lowry was, but yeah, man, it's kind of like, where would they be without him? Oh my God, do they need him? Someone who is kind of not a throw-in, but a very side part of this trade. He's become an essential part of the team.
Absolutely.
We ran out of time for Half Empty. That's okay. Maybe we could do it a little bit on the other side of this, plus a lightning round of questions for Rohan, including his thoughts on whether or not the Heat should go all in for Giannis. We'll talk about that next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. You can trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. We'll be right back.
We're here with Rohan Nadkarni from NBC News. Thrilled to have him back on the show for the first time this season. Let's punt on Half Empty because I don't feel like doing it and we're running out of time. So, but this is sort of similar, David. We haven't talked about the Terry Rozier situation in a while here. We have not talked about it with Rohan in a long time. There's been some reporting over the weekend that, yes, the Heat were upset about the entire Terry Rozier situation and things not being disclosed about the ongoing investigation at the time of the trade a couple of years ago, but that because his spot right now is basically frozen on the books right now, the Heat don't they don't expect to get any sort of clarity on whether or not they could trade Terry Rozier until they actually try to trade Terry Rozier. This was from ESPN and Jake Fisher over the weekend, both reporting that The NBA is basically not going to make a ruling on this until the Heat actually try to trade Terry Rozier, which I find very interesting because if the Heat try to trade Terry Rozier, they need to get somebody to agree to take Terry Rozier, and that team has to agree to take Terry Rozier, also not knowing whether or not they are allowed to take Terry Rozier. And basically, when I say take Terry Rozier, I mean take his expiring contract in order to help them facilitate maybe some money-saving moves going forward. But Rohan, since it's the first time we've really talked about it, more broadly, do Heat fans have a right to be mad about the Rozier situation? You're muted, buddy.
I think they have a right to be annoyed. The idea that the NBA is going to give them their pick back, look, it's a bad situation, and the NBA just at large about this gambling situation, I think, is scrambling a little bit, right? They're trying to plug a lot of holes, and it's a very difficult situation for the league to be in. I have some sympathy for them, but not a ton because they decided to bring so much gambling into the game. And then of course they will say people have been gambling this whole time. We don't need to unpack all of that right now. That's a much bigger and larger conversation. I think Heat fans should be annoyed. There is something to say about, it's one thing if someone gets, I don't want to play like the what is worse to do off the court Olympics right now because we don't want anyone getting in any sort of trouble or harming people, obviously. But it's a little bit different if someone, has an off-court arrest versus the potential to be banned from the league entirely or was potentially fixing games. I promise you teams would rather have someone with some sketchy off-court criminal activity that is not related to someone literally affecting the outcome of games. So that is what I think makes this situation an especially sticky one. I think Heat fans have a right to be annoyed, but also do not expect the league to give the Heat their pick back in 2 weeks so they can trade for Giannis, because I understand why it makes logical sense. Hey, just give the pick back. Why wipe your hands of it? Everyone's happy here. The flip side of that is the league is then setting a precedent that becomes incredibly tricky to navigate for the rest of the history of the league. So I understand why the league would be hesitant to do it also. So it's just sometimes, blank happens, Wes. That's really what I would say.
Well said.
That's too lukewarm, though. That's too lukewarm. I mean, honestly, I feel like they should be held liable for not disclosing this information. I think the issue is, determining how much are they responsible for admitting to a team that's actively engaged in trading for that player. That's a federal investigation. That's something that they conducted on their own within the NBA administrative offices to determine whether or not he was linked to this really far-ranging problem. This isn't like, oh, we heard you might have been involved with something that's on a much smaller scale. Like, there was potential for Rozier to be implicated in a bigger problem here, and for them not to disclose that, I don't know, man. I've got to disagree there. I feel like I understand the NBA is trying to cover themselves by saying we don't want to set a precedent. Totally understand that kind of line of thinking, but they did it to themselves at the same time. You can't be like, oh no, we saw it, everything was fine. And we've talked about on this show, like, we have serious questions about how extensive their investigation
Right.
was. Did they ask, like, Terry Rozier's friend, was he gambling? No. Okay, good enough for us. He's fine.
Right.
They cleared him, and then the FBI was like, nope, not so fast. So I feel
two things I would say. One is, again, I don't think you're wrong, David. I don't think you're wrong. I'll just explain, I think, kind of what maybe the NBA's perspective is, or why things have played out the way they are. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but a couple of things to consider here. One is, now the NBA has since said it did not clear Terry Rozier. At the same time, they also said that their investigation did not find anything. In terms of how thorough their investigation was, they've also said they cannot investigate to the level of the FBI. You mentioned talking to Terry Rozier's friend, for example. It's a lot different if the NBA is reaching out to interview him versus the FBI subpoenaing him, or the FBI trying to interview him, or the FBI threatening him with jail time if he does not cooperate with the investigation. That is not something the NBA can do in an investigation. So I think even people who are a little bit frustrated with the scope of the NBA's investigation, they are limited in what they can do compared to the literal Justice Department of the United States. In terms of this idea of should they have said there's an investigation open on him, etc., I would lean that the team should know.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there could be an issue with the players' union with that. Again, that I think there might be precedent issues set. So I get it. It's one of those things where in a micro situation, in a very specific situation, it seems very obvious what they should have done at every step. I think when you zoom out a little bit and think about the implications of what this could mean for the future, okay, what is the NBA obligated to share about players in any situation where anyone's being
I want to jump in there because ESPN had a report this morning about all of this, and in that report, it outlined the bylaws here. Quote, teams are required to share contractual, medical, and insurance information along with other material that would have prevented any player involved in a trade from playing. The question now becomes whether this clearly has nothing to do with contractual, medical, or insurance information. The gray area is that other material, like quote unquote other material. And the ESPN reported or got, multiple, anonymous executives here to talk about this. And they said, basically, yes, it's a gray area. Some said that disclosing this could lead to a slippery slope because on the NBA conducted an investigation, however thorough it might have been. They conducted an investigation, closed that investigation, their own internal investigation on Terry Rozier. And so I think the other part that doesn't get talked about enough in this is, had they, after closing that investigation on Terry Rozier, and then disclosed that investigation of Terry Rozier to the Heat upon trading for him, what would the Players Association thought about that? And how would they have gotten involved? Would they have pushed back and said, hey, why are you talking about our player like this when you conducted the investigation? My argument would be, well, we also told them that the investigation was closed. But at that point, had the league known, and there's been different reports, even though Adam Silver basically said on TV that they knew about the ongoing investigation federally into that. So there's a bunch of other things here, but basically there's internal, even in the league, disagreement on whether or not the Heat should have been made aware. But I think generally consensus is something should have been said to the Miami Heat at the very least, so that they could at least say, okay, let us take a beat, have a meeting about this with this new information, and then decide whether or not we want to move forward with this trade when they did make it. We got to jump on to the next topic here, though, really quick. Also from Jake Fisher this weekend, reporting that the Heat were not expecting to be as good as they've been this season. According to sources with knowledge of the team's thinking, and a 14-in start in a wide-open East appears to have them considering bolder win-now measures. All of this, of course, Rohan, is related to Giannis. My question to you, should the Heat go all in for Giannis?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That is the kind of player you go after. At his best, a potential top 1 player in the world. I think at his worst, a potential top 5 player in the world. If not now, then you're really not. I can't imagine someone like at his caliber is going to hit the market anytime soon. If not him, then otherwise you are praying to every known and unknown god that for some reason Anthony Edwards wants to leave Minnesota, which I don't see happening. So he's exactly the kind of player you go all in over. I think in an ideal world, you trade everyone except Bam. This is maybe we have this argument in January or sometime closer to the trade deadline. Do you make the Giannis Ware combo over the Giannis Bam combo? I don't know. It might be worth discussing at some point, but they have to go all in here. Can they get it done with the assets they have? I'm not sure. It would have helped a lot if Nikola Jovic was the player everyone on this podcast and the other Miami Heat podcast told me he was. But this is the kind of person that the Heat like. I know we've been saying this. Look, I thought they should have gone all in for Kevin Durant personally, especially considering the names being discussed and what he ended up getting moved for. But yeah, make your best possible offer and don't hold back on this one.
Seeing as how Bam apparently is the line that you draw in the sand as to what you don't want to include in a trade, is who's second in that line there? Descending order then. Like, who is the player that you'd be given most pause to include in a deal for Giannis?
Let me put it this way. I think the 3 players on the Heat who I think you would most want to have around Giannis for this season are Bam, Wiggins, and Powell. I think are the 3 players I would want on my Giannis-led team from this Heat roster. And the next one down might be Davion Mitchell.
I was going to say Davion might be cracking that top 3.
And that's not a slight to the other players on this roster, but entirely about I've seen Andrew Wiggins do it in a championship setting. I've seen Norm Powell playoff stars in NBA playoff settings. And, I just want defense and guys who can play a very specific role around someone like Giannis.
Rohan Nadkarni, NBC News. Thanks so much for jumping on, man. Been way too long.
Way too long. We'll do this again very soon.
Yeah,
guys.
ton more to get to. We left some meat on the bone there. That's going to do it for us today. Thanks for making us your first listen. This has been Locked On Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.